Hi, my name is Lynn Stanley, and I serve as the Curator of Education at the Provincetown Art Association and Museum. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to tonight's Freddie Schiff-Levin lecture, the inaugural screening of Liz McLean's video, Larry Collins in his studio, followed by a discussion with the artist Larry Collins in conjunction with his exhibition at PAAM, Finding Larry, on view here in this gallery. The exhibition is up through October 10th, 2010. This lecture series began in 2003 in honor of the artist Freddie Schiff-Levin, who was a member of Provincetown's art community from the 1960s until her passing in 2002. PAAM gratefully acknowledges John and Tony Levin and Herbert Lee, who make this program possible with their generous support. We also thank Angel Foods for supporting the program and for another fabulous cheese platter. So please help yourself to refreshments and cheese. Don't make us throw that cheese away, please. And please also visit Angel Foods across the street whenever you get the chance. Our next Freddie Schiff-Levin presentation will take place on Tuesday, October 5th, with the artist Peter Watts in conjunction with his exhibition at PAAM, The Natural World, the paintings of Peter Watts, on view September 24th through November 14th. Now on to tonight's presentation. For those of you in the audience tonight who know the artist Larry Collins, you may think of him as the former director of the Driscoll Gallery at the Schoolhouse Center and an expert on historical and fine art photography. Or you may think of Larry as a gifted teacher who has helped you find your way around the challenges of the human figure. You may know Larry as the person who served in and documented the Vietnam War, or the painter whose work is featured in this beautiful exhibition. As I thought about Larry in preparation for this event, I realized that over the decade or so that I've known him, he and his many gifts have unfolded slowly, like a flower, a richly petaled, gravelly voiced flower. Or as curator David Foley describes the artist, in Collins' work, as in his life, a persistent darkness is balanced by bursts of light. We at PAAM are grateful to David Foley for curating this comprehensive exhibition, to the videographer Liz McLean for working with Larry to document his creative process and his work, and not least of all to Larry for living such a richly creative life. So for the few of you here who don't know Larry personally, I will give a more formal introduction, his biography. Larry Collins was born in Spokane, Washington in 1945 and raised in Del City, Oklahoma. He was 17 years old when one of his paintings was selected by Dorothy Miller, curator of collections at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, for an important regional exhibition at the Oklahoma Center at Oklahoma City. He received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 1967 from the University of Oklahoma and the Master of Fine Arts in 1980 from Massachusetts College of Art. He was an infantryman and combat artist in the Vietnam War. Following years of teaching, Collins moved to Provincetown in 1993, and in 1998 he was offered the position of director of the Driscoll Gallery of Antiques and Fine Art Photography at the newly founded Schoolhouse Center for the Art and Design, where he revived local interest in photography as fine art. He went on to found Larry Collins Fine Art, a gallery continuing in the tradition of the Driscoll Gallery, and to enjoy acclaim for his curatorial skills, critical arts writing, and Vietnam photographs, and collaborations with poets Allen Ginsberg, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and Eileen Miles on illustrated books of poetry. He has received painting grants from the New Hampshire Council on the Arts and the Creative Arts Foundation for travel in Italy. His paintings, drawings, photographs, and books are in many permanent collections, including the Sheldon Memorial Art Gallery, Worcester Art Museum, Fred Jones Museum of Art, Maybe Guerra Museum, Provincetown Art Association and Museum, the Berg and Photographs collections at the New York Public Library, Boston Public Library, British Library, special collections at the University of North Carolina, and the library collections at Yale, the University of California at Berkeley, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. We're thrilled to have Larry here tonight and to also view this amazing video. So please help me welcome Larry.
Thank you, Lynn, very much. I'd like to take a minute to thank Chris McCarthy and all the staff here, Jim Zimmerman, everybody else that helped with this exhibition. They're a beautiful bunch, and I'm thrilled. But most of all, I'd like to thank the curator, David Foley. This is his conception. He's been working on this show for years. And he succeeded brilliantly. When I walked in, I was amazed. He was wise enough to keep me at a distance from this place. He wouldn't let me near the place when he was hanging the show, and I would get a phone call that day. I've just pulled another painting. I've just pulled 4 more. But he's always been absolutely right in his choices. And he's a good friend, a brilliant artist, a wonderful curator. And thank you, David. I love it. Thank you, people. Thank all of you for coming. I'd just like to acknowledge a few people that traveled a long ways to get here. Lucian and Brigida Kapp from Decatur, Illinois. They traveled all this way to hear me tonight. And you'll hear more about Lucian in the film that we're going to show. Jan and Bruce Jones from Lincoln, Nebraska. Thank you so much for coming. We were on a trip to Vietnam together recently, last year. Katie McGrail from San Antonio, Texas. Cheryl Cupper, Kenny Gata, Forrest Williams from New York City. And all you people from the west end of town. If I've forgotten anybody, forgive me. I really appreciate everybody being here. I really do, honestly. This is the kind of thing artists really dream about, and I'm very grateful. I went to California this winter to paint because I knew the show was coming up, and I thought there might be a slight chance I would do a couple of paintings that were worthy of this show. But before I left for California, Liz McLean, my friend, called me, and she said, very low-key as she is, how about coming into your studio and letting me videotape you? Just a little thing, you know, a few minutes. So I'm like, okay, whatever. And I didn't give it a second thought. I didn't even shave, as you'll see in here. But she produced a beautiful film. And when I saw it, I thought, I can't do any better than this film. So I want to show it tonight to you. It's about a half hour. And it's me in my studio here in Provincetown talking about my life and my paintings. And so what I'd like to do is show this film and then answer some questions with the time we have left if you have any questions. And thank you again for coming. I share this studio with 2 other people at this point, so I can afford it. It's getting more and more expensive. I've had this studio for over 10 years, and it's a great space. We're up here on the 2nd floor of the U.S. Post Office. Not many people know that there are art studios up here, and I guess that's the way we like it. So they all say that I have terrible taste in music, which is probably true. So every single one of these has been played 1,000 times, so I don't know. I'm a figurative painter, but I wouldn't call myself particularly a realist. More like an expressionist. My heroes are the post-impressionists, Cezanne, Van Gogh, Gauguin, I guess, when those were the people that early on really influenced me, really moved me. And they still do. This one was done in a tiny little basement studio in Melrose, Mass. And it was about, I don't know, 8 feet wide and 10 feet that way. And the only thing that I could see sitting at my easel was looking up at this group of shelves. So I had to use that as the motif for a number of the paintings, and I just started stuffing things in the shelves. Some of the earlier paintings were, one of the major forms was cut up watermelons, so I just continued it. I would go to the store and buy watermelons and chop them up, and they would rot, and then I'd go to the next one. This is a sculpture by Brancusi. A lot of people think it's a pepper grinder or something, but it is a famous sculpture by Brancusi that's very tall. But the connection is only really a formal one, you know, sculptural cut-up forms of wood and watermelon. When I was young, I was painting abstracts in high school, abstract paintings. When I got into college, they loved those, but I wasn't satisfied with them. I wanted to learn to draw the figure, and I wanted to learn to draw it well, so I went to my life drawing teacher and told him I wanted to learn anatomy. But he said, why? Because I wanted to draw the figure well, you know, perfectly, I thought. So he said, well, here's a book, go study the book. And I did, I read it, I studied it, I drew from it, but I didn't learn anything. I couldn't do it by myself. So I complained to him, and he said, well, go to the medical school. So I went to the medical school cadaver lab and started drawing cadavers. And I still didn't learn it. You know, the whole point is organizing the information for your mind to take in and sort out and then use it. So what did I do? Years later, I took another anatomy class that was quite organized, and I began to teach it. And I've taught anatomy off and on for many years for artists. And so I do figure drawing, and here's some of my drawings here. We have a group that meets in this studio every week for probably about 13 years now. And these are some of the ones that I've done, hundreds of them. And I have to say that although they're not all very good, they're not all good. I did reach my goal and learn to draw the figure really well. I think, anyway. And I'd have to say, I've been in Provincetown for 15 years now, and if I could be proud of one accomplishment here, it would be my figure drawings. And I do teach figure drawings still at the Art Association here. I was a very shy, sort of introverted person. And it was just an attempt to, like, get close to people, you know, just create people for myself. You know, sort of like a kid creates imaginary friends, I guess. And that's kind of corny sounding, but you get the gist. It's like that, you know, an attempt, sort of an artist's attempt to get close to other people without really getting close to them. This painting is part of a group that I did of, with a nude as the major element, and each painting was meant to express a certain emotion. This is fear. Some of the other ones were loneliness, and they were mostly negative, I have to say, as most expressionists tend to be a little negative. But I'm not negative anymore, so. This is a large painting. I did a series of 6 big paintings, this being the smallest one of them. And where I combine 2 things that I use the most, still life and figure. At this time I was interested in, I did this in New York, I was interested in Tintoretto and the Venetians, how they painted. And Tintoretto used to start with a very dark ground and then go in with the highlights. So it was like lightning exploding onto his canvas from the very beginning. And then he would go down to the middle tones, the few middle tones that he used. And so I started with a dark, almost bluish black ground here, very dramatic. Most of my paintings tend to be dark, and I've been criticized a lot for it. But that's just the way I am. And if it happens over and over and over again, then you know there's something going on that you should not mess with. That's what I think. This is a self-portrait right here of me at, I think I'm like 37 there or something like that. This is also that basement apartment, basement studio I worked in back in the 1980s, the late 80s. And this painting came up for auction. I found out it was going to be up for auction, so I always liked it and I bought it back. I had to pay for my own painting, a lot more than I sold it for. This is a little self-portrait I did when I was in 1962 when I was still in high school. I was so confident there. This is about as realistic as I get, I guess. And what's happened lately with my work, and I just sort of go where it goes, it's become much more abstract again. This is the watermelon painting with the Brancusi in it. This is another painting that's in New York right now. And that's something I often would do, is paint my earlier paintings into current paintings. I don't know what that's about, but Shakespeare did it with his plays. He put plays within plays, and paintings within paintings. Here's a big one over here that I've never been able to finish. Well, I finished it actually several times. And I don't know what's going to happen with it. I'll probably die with this unfinished in my studio. Degas had a painting, a huge painting that he worked on all his life. He never finished it, and it was in his studio. I think maybe it's like a good thing, if I could be like Degas. So I finished this before and I've shown it, and then I've repainted it. It doesn't look anything like it was in the beginning. Here's an earlier self-portrait that, I think I did this when I was 20. Never finished quite, but that was really tough. I didn't know how to draw well enough. I sort of taught myself to draw. I mean, I always had a talent, but I didn't know the skills, the basic skills of drawing, you know, the traditional skills. So I had to, after college, after years and years of college, I just got out some books and started teaching myself, and it was a struggle. And so when I teach, the first thing I teach is the basic drawing to everybody, no matter what the class is, the basic elements of drawing. Because I think that if you can draw, you can do anything. If you can't draw, you can't do much of anything. Now this thing right here is one of the current paintings I'm working on. And this one and this one and the one on the easel. Oh, they're upside down, I forgot. But it doesn't matter so much, but they are paintings of this studio actually looking this way to this wall, so you can see that figure there. But they're painted in the dark. They're painted at night in the dark. And I'm interested in that. I've been interested in that for a while now. I'm less interested in painting, you know, a traditional representation of something, even expressionist, with the expressionist sort of flavor that I have, and more interested in those things that you can't see, but that are just as real as anything else. I was painting outside once a still life of a bunch of flowers and fruit, cut up watermelon and some flowers thrown into a can out in a yard. And I painted for several hours, and without realizing it, it had turned dark. It was dark outside and I was still painting, and I didn't realize it was dark. And then I took the painting and I looked at it inside, and it was a completely different painting than I thought, but I really thought there's something in this painting different and important. So I think that was the first time that I realized this might be a method of pulling stuff out of myself or finding stuff out there that is not real obvious with the lights on. So I did a few years later, I did a few landscapes in the dark. This is of a garden in Provincetown at night. I painted this in the absolute darkness. And what it does is it's like a sensory deprivation. It forces me to use other parts of my brain instead of what just comes in. Another thing that I do when I get to a point in my life or to a subject that I don't really completely understand, I seem to be able to, now I've done this several times. Basically, I'm a figurative painter. I like to have something out there that I'm looking at and draw from that. Not simply an impression or a feeling, but draw from the physical, formal elements of the thing. But when I have things that I can't really understand, whether they're visual or emotional or whatever, what I've done is I kicked into another style of working. I did a series of paintings years ago about important traumatic things in my life, and I think I was working on them myself, but all I could figure out about them were little pieces of them. I can remember this and remember that, and I understood that, but I didn't understand that. So I started using collage in these pieces, and I did a show, and it was all a complete show of collages, which is not usual for me. But it seemed an obvious style to use, and it worked out pretty well. Some of them were successful, others as artworks, others I think are probably not. This painting right here was painted not long before I went back to Vietnam. I was a soldier in Vietnam during the war. I was an infantryman, and I decided 40 years later to go back on a trip to see places where I'd been and to find places that were important to me. But I couldn't quite get a handle on the whole thing, you know. I never had been able to. And so I began to think about it, remember it, and I remembered the day that we were flying, the night or day, I don't remember what it was, that we were flying out, lifting off, and it was like this incredible sense of relief and mixed with all kinds of other emotions. And so this painting is called South China Sea. That's where we lifted up and flew over. I didn't look at the sea when I was painting this. I started out with a postcard of the sea, a little picture postcard, and then I just went from there. And I think this is more successful for me, sort of expressing the feeling that I had about the whole thing, than if I had just taken my easel out to the water and started painting. This is another Vietnam painting right here called the A Shaw, referring to the A Shaw Valley. And this is a place where a lot of people I knew were killed, and I went back to this place. And it's a very abstract painting, but it's kind of the only way I could like do it. I don't know how to explain it more than that. This is my library right here. I love art history, and I love reading about art and understanding it, learning about art. So I made a little library for myself. And this is one of my favorite places in Provincetown. I have thousands of books, as you can see. And this is a book on Agnolo Bronzino. A friend of mine just called me and said that the Met is going to have a big show of his work coming right up. Oh, this painting right here, when I first moved to New York, right after the Army, moved there, and I went to the Frick, and I stood in front of this painting. I knew this painting, and I stood in front of this painting. I remember having this experience like, oh my God, here I am right in front of this great painting, and nobody else is around, and this painting belongs to me right now. Here's the one that's in the Met detail of it. It's a great picture. He was a great painter, a Mannerist, 16th century Italian. Here's one of my favorite photographers we talk about. I have a gallery where I sell mostly vintage photography, and I had a show of this man's work. Larry Burroughs, great Vietnam photographer. He was killed over there. He was a Life magazine photographer, but he was to me like the perfect war photographer. His photographs are about people. He's very sensitive to people, whether soldiers or Vietnamese. It's not so much about the action, you know, it's about the people. And I've always loved his work. Here's his most famous one, I think. There it is. Oh, jeez. I can barely look at these things. This is his most famous picture. great photographer. Here's my boy, Vincent. My high school art teacher, who I owe my whole career to, basically. When I was 15 years old, he brought me, oh, here's one of my favorite paintings. See, I even have a dog-eared here. This is Vincent's Starry Night, but not the one that's known the most, the one in the modern Museum of Modern Art. This is Starry Night on the Rhone, but it's, I think most critics and a lot of people believe that this is far superior. It's an amazing picture. I look at this all the time, trying to get inspiration for what I'm doing. It's a beautiful picture. If you go out here in Provincetown at night and look across the bay, you'll see something similar, the lights reflecting down like that. My art teacher brought me a catalog of Van Gogh's work. I'd never really even seen it. And I was immediately, just completely amazed by it. And of course I began to paint like him immediately. These painters all like really are meaningful to me. They're not like long dead and gone. They're still move me. When I was in high school, my art teacher, Monty Hoke, would bring in books to show me. He wouldn't say much about them. He'd just leave them out for me to read, and this was one of them. I always remembered this book, so a couple of years ago I went online and found a used copy of it. And of course I was very young and I was fascinated by everything. These are prize-winning paintings from back then. There was one particular picture in here that really affected me, or really caught my attention. Lucian Cap's painting. I remember when I looked at this is Joshua Camp for Light, and it says in the statement that he was in the Navy at the time, right before he did this, and this is a memory of the Navy, of his time in the Navy in Tokyo. And I don't know what it was about this painting, but I've never forgotten about it all my life. And I keep thinking about it. So I'm happy to have this book so I can actually look at it again. I've asked myself what it is about this painting that always held my attention. And I think that I painted somewhat like that. It was a language of drawing and painting and expressionism that was perfect for me. So I immediately recognized myself in this picture. I don't know, I love this painting still. It's important to me. I thought, if I can paint like that, I want to be a painter. I want to be an artist. And it's about this time that I decided I was going to be an artist. I'm having a show, which is a big thrill, a big honor for me. And they're going to start with work from way back. And one piece is a big, huge abstract painting that I did when I was 16, I think it was, 16 or 17. That was in a big juried show, juried by this woman from the Museum of Modern Art in New York, Dorothy Miller, a very famous woman. She's dead now, but the word got around Oklahoma City that this kid, me, got into this big show that everybody was dying to get into. And it was a big, huge thing, looked sort of like a de Kooning, but blue and white, yellow. And it sort of set me on the road, you know. I became well known and people became aware of me, the university became aware of me, and came and offered me a scholarship, and I was on my way. But I have my high school art teacher to thank for all of it. His daughter now owns that painting, and she's going to send it here to Provincetown to be in the show, so it'll be interesting to see it. I haven't seen it in all those years. It was in a fire. It was in a pizza joint in Oklahoma City, and the place burned down, and the one thing they ran in and saved was that painting. Because they liked that painting. Can you see this big abstract painting in Oklahoma City in a pizza joint? I just can't imagine. In Vietnam, I was a combat illustrator. I started out as an infantryman, and they found out that I could draw, and so they took me out of the field and made me an illustrator. This is exactly what it looked like and felt like. In fact, I've often thought maybe this is my squad. I remember patrolling through a place like this. So they sent me from the field like this to the newspaper office in the base camp, Camp Evans, 1968. This is at the height of the war. This is the Battle of Hue, Quezon. And my first editor there was Donald Graham, who is CEO of the Washington Post now, son of Catherine Graham, still a good friend. And he came to me and he said, I want you to illustrate this story I wrote called Grunt's World. Grunt is an infantryman. And these are my illustrations. The originals have disappeared somewhere in Vietnam in the mud, I guess. And I said, well, what do you want me to paint? How do you want them painted? And he said, do whatever you want. So he gave me complete freedom. And these figures are based on guys that I knew. This guy was killed. And they're not portraits, but that's who I was thinking about. This guy were killed. We used to create our own little stoves out of tin cans and plastic explosives that we would set on fire and cook our food. Well, anyway, I did this for the rest of the time that I was in the Army. These are mine. Just so like, I painted these at night, and they're pictures about nighttime operations. But I was staying awake all night and sleeping in the day, painting by myself. You know, I'm from Oklahoma, I'm from the Midwest, so I'm very kind of not up in the air, if you know what I mean. I try to be down to earth. Not stupid, but down to earth. This is one that I'm working on now. I mean, you know, unless you really look, it's completely abstract and looks non-objective, but these are big forms that sort of come out of the dark. This kind of slashy painting is very natural to me. I've tried at different points in my life to clean up my act, but it doesn't work too well. This is just the way I am. And so I've sort of accepted, you know, this is where my talent is. This very expressive kind of brushwork. And I don't know what this is going to turn into. Somebody said to me the other day, well, you can draw really well. Why are you painting like this? And I don't feel a particular demarcation between figurative drawing or painting and this. It's all just like a continuum to me. I could easily go from this to this. You know, this is all about drawing. This is about a different kind of drawing. This is about, the intent is different too. I actually bought out the contents of an art supply store that was going out of business. So for a few $100s, I got all this. But then I add things to it over the years. I've always wanted to be a painter. That's all I ever wanted to be, really. I had to have jobs, other jobs, proofreader, dishwasher, factory, army, of course, libraries. And now I'm an antiques dealer and an art dealer. I've been an art dealer for 13 years. But that's how I make my money. This is what I really do. This is me, the real me. I love this studio. This is the greatest studio in town. I was very lucky to get it. I'd probably give up my apartment before I give this up. Where's Liz? Liz McLean. Liz McLean. It wasn't that better than staring at me for a half hour. Wonder if we could lift. Is there a way to get this screen up?
Yeah.
Let me get my notes here. So, just quickly before questions, I wanted to point out that this painting and this painting are the latest paintings in the show, and I did them this past winter in California. This is done in a forest, eucalyptus forest in California, and I realized halfway through the painting that I was painting about Vietnam. It was a forest there, but in my head I was back thinking about Vietnam. About the A Shot Valley, I went on a trip back to Vietnam, 2009. And I specifically wanted to find this place, the A Shot Valley, where I had never been. This is the place where a number of my friends were killed, and I've always felt this need to find it, to see it. And, their bodies were never brought back, so that makes it doubly hard for us. So this is like a memorial painting. I still find it hard to talk about sometimes. I wasn't going to do this, but it's all right, it's all right. So, how about some questions? Yes, Katie?
Is Liz's film going to be in DVD and available?
I don't know, is it?
If you want it to be.
I think so, and also this whole lecture, including the film, will be available from the Art Association, along with the catalog, which is beautiful. Have you seen it? You can buy it out front, and I'll sign it for you. Yes, hi.
You made a reference in the film about doing collage, and you talked about it as kind of you fell into it at a period of your life. And can you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a collage guy? Because I definitely see it in the stuff, but I'm wondering what was going on for you when you went to it. You made that, you said that in the film, and you never sort of expanded it, so I'm curious. Like, when were you doing collage? When was that going?
What's the date on this? 1998.
Okay.
97. Well, I was in one of those periods where I had sort of stopped painting for a while, and I didn't know what the heck to do. And I was also personally sort of at loose ends about a lot of stuff, and I didn't know what was going on in my head. So I read somewhere that Picasso said painting your art should be like a diary. And I thought, yeah, bingo. So I said to myself, well, paint what's going on in your head right now. You know, and so I started this series. I tend to work better, I tend to be more successful if I set a goal, a series for myself. So I set this series about some particular things that had gone on in my life that were, you know, difficult. And these collages are about those. They're not specifically to be read literally, but I believe that if you put yourself into a painting, the viewer's going to see that. They may not read the whole story literally, but the feeling will come through. You know, that's what expressionism is all about. You know, although a lot of these are figurative paintings, my basic aesthetic is expressionism. I grew up with being influenced by the abstract expressionists mostly. So that's what these are about. There was a whole series, and I did a show of them. And it's really sort of not the style that I'm most interested in. But I explained, you know, sort of why I picked that. I didn't quite understand these things I was painting about, bits and pieces here. And I don't know what else to say about that. Hope that answers it.
That's good.
Yes, hi.
It's a great show, very impressive.
Thank you.
Question, do you work, you know, some of your work is more representational than others, you know, in realistic terms. Do you work abstract and representational at the same time? Do you work on multiple pieces at once, or do you get into a vein and you just sort of stay with that and shift that?
Well, I think most of my work is figurative. And I remember, as I said in the film, when I was young and I entered college, I was painting mostly complete abstracts, which is sort of, we were encouraged to do that. You know? But I wasn't happy with that. I wanted to paint figures, I wanted to paint things, and so I, you know, so always cantankerous that way. But now I find myself moving from figurative work into abstraction and back and forth. So in fact, I do work on abstract paintings and figurative paintings at the same time. I don't really see a separation, a clear separation between them. As can sometimes start with the figurative painting, and it will just morph into something you would never know what it is. That's how I think.
Do you also write, keep journals, or is this the,
I do write,
in your journals?
yeah, I have a huge pile of them. Some they'll get them in order, but yeah, I write journals. I have for years and years, and I decided a few years ago I was going to write my memoirs, and I started. They're not done yet, but I do have a lot written. I also have written articles for magazines, newspapers, mostly articles about art and photography. You know, that sort of thing. Yes, Mark Adams.
Thanks, Mary. You know, you've been an inspiration to a lot of people, and including me. And I don't know, aside from your great studio and George's Pizza, what has Provincetown done for you?
Well, I remember being really at loose ends at one point in my life. I had a partner of 17 years and he passed away. And I wanted actually to mention that he was one of the important people who encouraged me to be a painter and stay a painter and just keep doing it through a bad period of my life. So I was really at loose ends. I didn't know what to do with myself. I lived in New Hampshire. And I decided to come to Provincetown for a couple of weeks for vacation, and I did. And I threw my easel and paints in the back of the van. And I went out to Pilgrim Lake and started painting by myself one day. I felt so good. Oh my God, this is it. I'm calm, everything is perfect, and I feel good painting, and I'm gonna move here. So I did. And that's what happened. And after a while, all the fun was over. I realized it's a great place to live here, but it's sometimes hard. That's why it's like living here sometimes. Yes.
You shift gears so well, and I noticed the mediums that you used here. Do you ever do watercolor also, or do you not care for that?
I haven't done watercolor for years, but I have done watercolors in the past. I did a whole series back in, what was it, the early 80s, or the middle 80s, no, early 80s. But I haven't done them for years. I prefer oil, I think that way, you know. Oil and watercolor procedures are sort of opposite one. Oil is dark to light. And watercolor is light to dark. So I prefer oil. You know, I like to throw that paint around. Yes, hi.
Could you talk a little bit about Vietnam and what it was like on your recent visit?
Sure, I'll try. I'm not too good at it sometimes. It was hot. It was really hot. You get off the plane and it's like you're hit by this wall, this solid wall of heat that doesn't leave you until you leave the country, or until you leave that part of the world. What really made me happy was to see that Vietnam is a dynamic, booming place now. Its economy is based in tourism. 80% of the people, I believe, are under 30. So they don't remember, or they don't have direct experience with the war. And they're very friendly, they're very beautiful people. It made me feel good. So I was there to see the place, what it's like now, but as I said, one of my main reasons was to to go to the A Shau Valley and other places where I had been. And the people I was with were very good. They made sure I got there. And it wasn't a done deal either. It wasn't easy to get there. We had difficulties. But I did get there, and I found the spot I was looking for. You know, this stuff was always in my head. And you fill in the blanks with your imagination if you don't actually experience it. I've asked myself, when I was doing this, what's the connection here between a story like that, emotions like this, and color and line? I'll remember this one time in undergraduate school when this teacher said in an art history class, just always remember that the form in the painting is the content. I don't mean to be teachery here, but it was like a revelation to me. The color, the line, the composition, that is what the painting is about. And that's the language that you use. And, you know, if you're like an expressionist, you just paint on faith that that will come through to the viewer. And it does, it really does. And
thanks, Larry. You talked a lot in the video about form and figure, and you didn't talk a lot about color. You just said something about color right now, but and I'm always, when I look at your work, I'm always so struck by the strength and the vibrancy and the color. And I don't know if I have a coherent question, but I'm just wondering if you can talk about like how you found your palette, or I'm just saying I'm interested in your relationship to color, and if you have anything to say about that, I'd love to hear it.
well, it's other people that say I found my palette. My relationship with color is a mystery to me. It just sort of, I do what seems to be the right thing. I don't, I've been criticized a great deal for my color, for two things. Color, and that my paintings are dark. And
what are the, can I just ask, what are the criticisms of the color?
well, let me put it this way. My painting teacher in college said, you can draw really well, but you can't paint at all. Well, he was wrong. I don't know, color for me is like instinctive. You know, I've studied color, so I understand complements and secondaries and all this and how color interaction. But when it comes right down to doing it, it's not so calculated. I just go for what is in here. And I do believe that my work and all work should be based in, all work like this should be based in drawing. You have to be able to draw. If you're going to be an artist, you better learn how to draw. That's what I believe. Here I go. You'll hear me say things like this in my classes. Right. Okay.
Back.
Michael.
Larry, you talked about, you know, periods of not painting. I love, you know, this thing about always kind of going back to wherever you were doing a vocation or where you were living or whatever. But is there anything, and then a little bit about the library in your studio, which I love to see, but is there anything you could say, or that, I don't know if it's an appropriate question or not, but is there anything about your studio practice that is interesting, would be interesting to know? Like, is there something that you do every day, like at the beginning, at the end, or, you know, because you seem to identify a project or have an idea and go to it and then paint around that until it's done or changes or something. But a lot of people have a schedule or a ritual, or some people read first, or is there anything like that that you like to do in the studio?
Well, I've tried it many times. It just doesn't work. I'm not disciplined enough. Or it doesn't feel good or something. I really want to be like that, but I'm still working on it. it seems I go through periods where I work a lot, you know, like a big lot. And then other times where I'm just like, ugh, I'm so tired, I don't want to go just do it. So I don't produce a lot for a while. And, you know, I just accept that that's the way I am. I look around and I say, Larry, stop beating yourself up. You produced a lot of work, you know, so let it go. And so I do. There's one thing that I do regularly, though, that's draw from the figure. I have a group that meets in my studio once a week, and we've done this for 13, 15 years, I don't know, every single week in the winter. We can't do it in the summer here because we're too busy, but that's really been important to me. When I don't feel like I'm an artist anymore because I haven't been painting for a while, I get that feeling, you're not an artist. The regular figure drawing reminds me that I am. You know, it's good. So for me, it's important to at least do that. Yes.
Back to Vietnam. Were you given an assignment and were you censored, or some of your paintings are lovely paintings, but they're oil? I would think that they would take time, and I'm just not sure how you were assigned to, what were you assigned to do? For who?
Well, I was in the 1st Air Cavalry Division, and they had one combat artist in the division. That was me. There were teams of combat artists that the Army in general had that they would send to Vietnam, and they would go out and do their thing. But I was working for the division, for the newspaper office with combat reporters and combat photographers. And to be honest, they really didn't know anything about art, so they would just, I would tell them what I was going to do. And they would say, okay, all right. I was bad. Once I told them, you have to do these things in a war. I told them, I said, I need to be in air conditioning because these acrylics are not going to last. So they sent me to the photo lab and flew by. It was in air conditioning. Don't tell anyone.
You said how emotionally difficult this was, but one thing you said when you were speaking of it, of your trip back there, you said it was so difficult. Was it physically difficult to get to that place, or politically difficult?
Physically difficult. There was an accident in the group in the middle of the night. Somebody had a serious accident, and there was talk about canceling the trip. And I'm like, I came all the way around the world, and it's not going to happen. But Bruce made sure we got there. Bruce was with me, and you know, 65 years old, moving through the jungle is not as easy as it was when I was 21. It was tough. But it was worth it, you know. It was worth it. I took a stone from here, actually, the beach, and I buried it right there where my friends fell. We're buried, you know, just falling. What can I do? So I did that. Lucian.
Larry, this is a question. This is an exclamation. This is a magic evening for some of us. I think for all of us here, and I can sense an aura of affection in this room for Larry Collins. Larry had an advantage over me because he's known me since 1960. He's known my work since 1960. And our exchange of letters produced a very humbling experience for me. I never considered myself much of a teacher. I taught more than the University of Decatur, but I did have several students who wrote to me later in retrospect and said, you did no harm, basically. nice compliments, but I've never had a compliment like Larry's that's come from afar. He wrote in one of his letters that this is a exhibition of a lifetime. Well, for me, I don't want to get too emotional, it is a validation of a lifetime. Because to feel that you have influenced somebody of talent like Larry, and Larry is a personification of a total commitment to art. He is a royal priesthood of artists. This is what people aspire to. And to be here to honor Larry this evening is extremely special. In the letter that I wrote to you, first of all, one postscript, I have to add this. He told you about this painting, Yoshawara Camphor Light, and that he wanted to know the meaning of it, which I went through all the, I guess you said, high-flying explanations, you know, of what the words meant. I was into micro-poetry at the time and assigning abstract poetic titles to abstract paintings, and it was a lyrical abstract painting. But Larry this evening has shown me in this video a superb human being who is candid, is extremely honest, very consoled to you, which is a true art in itself. There's a humanity to you, Larry, and it shows up in this video, and that is a humbling thing. One thing I wrote in the last, this is a postscript I almost forgot. He didn't tell you this. I had to write back to Larry and explain to him that in 1960, I destroyed this painting. I burned the painting with about two dozen other things because I was in sort of a purist mode and nothing would do except absolute perfection. And of course, now I'm an idiot at 77 years of age, having destroyed these things. But I destroyed this painting, and I had to tell Larry that I destroyed it. And there was this kind of long silence. I didn't hear anything from him, and I thought, oh my God. He's in this darkened studio somewhere, and I don't know what I have done. But he came out of this very nicely, and I brought him a little consolation prize this evening, which is an etching done in 1959. But the last postscript to my letter, that I just want to read this to you, this explains what I was trying to say to Larry. I said, if Yoshawara Camphor Light were more than ashes, I would send it to Provincetown for your keeping. In its place, I offer a supplicant's gratitude for your gladdening words. They are the artist's wage and a treasured revelation from afar. Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
I did enjoy posing for your drawing class this summer.
Thank you. So, are we done?